Join us today for a hopefully brief addition to the Star Trek retrospective that we have recently released covering the original 6 movies. Welcome back to those who've been here before. Welcome to those who are new to the channel. This is the Geek Cabal channel. This is Bobby. This is Jim. Hopefully, since you're watching this, you hopefully watched at least one or more of the Star Trek videos we recently released, covering the original 6 movies in the franchise that involve the original cast from the TV series. This is a little bit of a follow-up. Basically, I made the mistake of going into the other one working purely on memory because I have seen recently enough 4 of the 6 movies that I was able to just go. Whereas I had not very recently watched the original the motion picture, or Star Trek V, not Search for Spock, Star Trek 3, The Final Frontier. And in the time from editing the others to now, I told myself, well, I really should watch these other 2 in case there's something I'm missing. And there was a few things that I thought were worth noting. So this will hopefully be short, hopefully. Also, before I continue, please don't forget to check out our Twitter account at Real Geek Cabal, or our Facebook account, which should just be Geek Cabal. They'll both be linked to in the description. For the moment, they're mainly notifications and funny memes that we find, but we do hope to do more with them once we have more people engaging with them. So, if you got the time and inclination, please check those out. So, as we noted in the other video, Star Trek's 2, 3, and 4 are a cohesive narrative. They're a trilogy unto themselves. And I think the other movies might actually be more cohesive than we give them credit for, and not just rampant sequel-itis running through them. To briefly explain that, because I don't know if I have any of the videos, the term, I don't know if anyone else uses it, that's my term for it. Movies, for those younger people in the audience, movies didn't used to be like, hey, let's plan for 10 sequels and lay the seeds throughout the movie for them, just in case we succeed. It was like, no, the movie succeeded. They're like, okay, well, now let's write another movie with these characters in a hopefully different situation. And maybe we'll reference something in the first movie, maybe we won't. You get this in like action franchises like Lethal Weapon. Like, the only thing connecting those movies are the characters. Like, the situation in 1 doesn't affect the situation in 2, doesn't affect the situation in 3, doesn't affect the situation in 4. Unless I'm forgetting something.
Well, the one that comes to mind for me is Predator and Predator 2, because there was the connection because the government kind of knew of things, but really,
yeah, they briefly in one conversation referenced the events of the first movie, but the second movie you could cut that out entirely, come up with some other BS, and just there's your movie. Okay, the plot did not hinge on the first movie. I imagine some stylistic choices did because we already knew about the Predator. But beyond that, yeah, and same thing with Predators and the Predator. Stupidest naming convention I've ever heard of. Outside of the Fast and Furious movies that can't decide what the hell they're going to do with each movie. So anyway, like I said, I think the movies are a little more connected. I don't really have a lot to say about the motion picture. To be totally honest, even rewatching it, I passed out for about half the movie. Once they were inside V'ger, to them finally going and meeting up with the probe at the end, somewhere in there I lost consciousness and did not regain it until they were talking to the probe. And I remember the movie from that point on, with what's his name merging with the robot version of the woman that got killed earlier in the movie. So, like, I'm still going to go back and rewatch that just in case there's something I'm missing. But I will say there are at least two things that stand out. Number one, Kirk is already an admiral, and the ship is still like not under construction, but it's not 100% yet. And there's a different captain. It's Decker, and he's the guy that ends up merging with V'ger at the end. And Kirk's already like, man, I kind of wish I was back in the captain's chair. And like he doesn't say that, I don't think, but he winds up back in the captain's chair, and Decker's like, oh, you screwed me, Kirk. Like, why are you doing this? And a lot of the internal shots make the Enterprise look way bigger than it should be, or at least that it is depicted in the other movies.
Well, except for compared to the J.J. Abrams movies, which make
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Enterprise look like a.
yeah.
But uh, no, and in the beginning of that one, it's actually the original series Enterprise, but it's getting retrofitted to
Okay.
they're taking out, putting the different pylons on it, the different warp nacelles, upgrading. But to your point, it still wasn't complete. It hadn't gone through its trials yet. Um, that's where you get that weird trippy.
Yeah, yeah, that business.
Yeah.
But yeah, like so Kirk has to convince Bones to come back to Starfleet. And Bones is rocking a pretty sweet looking huge beard and just like a big like hippie medallion thing going on. And I don't know what the hell is going on with him, but it's like we need more of this Bones. Where was he in the other movies? Uh, but he gets him back on board. Spock, like you mentioned, the other is doing the Kolinar, but he doesn't complete it because like, oh, your mind is clouded by something, and it's V'ger talking to him or something. And I don't think he ever goes back and completes it.
No.
But you see yet again, the uber logic types are there wearing like robes and burning incense and on some rocks doing a ritual, and it's like you guys are supposed to be like the advanced race, and this is all like mystical mumbo jumbo. What are you doing? And that's going to come up again when I talk about Star Trek V here in a minute. So, but the big connection is the Enterprise is being retrofitted. It's not quite ready, so they got to take it out. Kirk's got to take command. Well, then you jump to Star Trek 2, and it's done because Kirk's coming on board to do the inspection as an admiral. Spock is the captain, and everyone else is, basically in their positions. And so I think that's supposed to be from Star Trek 1 to 2 that, like, now the ship is finally actually ready to go. And so I think that's a recurring, like, an overarching plot point that we were supposed to get from 1 to 2. Um, there was something else about 1. It'll come to me here in a second.
That every time they got a new captain, they had to die. and then when, and then
Yeah, well,
and then when Kirk's like, well, there's no captain to die on the ship this time because I'm technically an admiral. Well, then we're gonna make the ship die.
yeah, yeah. Death does kind of follow him everywhere. Um, oh, also, is it Nurse Chapel? Was she the one? Is she the nurse in the original series?
Yes.
Well, she has become a doctor, and she's in the first movie. But she's a doctor now. She's not a nurse. And Bones is like, I don't want to know how she's running a goddamn ER. This, that, and the other. Uh, so that was another carryover from the series that I don't think carried over in any of the movies. And I swear there's someone else on the Enterprise that I recognize their appearance from the show, but it's not important. So you have that going into 2, and then in 2 going into 3, they had to steal the Enterprise, and it gets blown up in 3. Then they gave them in 4, they gave them a retrofitted ship to the Enterprise A. So then we get to 5, and they're still like trying to work out the kinks because it was a different ship, and it wasn't complete. So Kirk, Bones, and Spock are all on shore leave while they're still trying to fix the ship. And so that's like the main connective tissue between 4 and 5. But what you also got was in Star Trek 4, you see that the Federation has dealings with the Klingons and the Romulans. They both have ambassadors there dealing with the Federation. And so by 6, whenever the peace talks finally occur, the groundwork has been laid that the Federation does have a diplomatic relationship with the Klingons, and presumably a tentative peace based on something else in 5 I'm going to mention here in a second. So the peace in 6 doesn't just come out of nowhere. It's definitely been building through the movies with little background details. And one of those is in Part 5. The younger Klingon captain tries to attack the Enterprise, and the ambassador, once it's all settled, orders him to apologize to Kirk, and he apologizes and also says, my government did not sanction this attack. So there is already a tentative peace of some kind between the Federation and the Klingons at this point. And so that could have been post Star Trek 3, where Krug, I keep forgetting his name, Christopher Lloyd's character, could have been a rogue agent. He might have been acting outside the commands of the Empire. Or it could be or it could be because of that and the Genesis device that the three nations started talking. Because the reason that the ambassadors are all on Nimbus 3, not the ambassadors from the other, but the ambassadors that are there, is because Nimbus 3 was supposed to be a project that the Federation, Klingons, and Romulans were all going to work to try to basically not colonize. What are we trying to do to Mars? Terraforming. It's habitable, but they wanted to make it a paradise, and so that's how they drew in the people that are there. Then they all got disenfranchised, and they're the perfect army for Cybok because they've been screwed over by everybody. And so there's just a bunch of little details like that that I think, since I didn't watch the movie, I didn't pick up on it, and so I think the movies are a more cohesive narrative from 1 to 6. Not so much 1, but some of the stuff's there through 6, that it builds towards that finale of final peace with the Klingons. And I think there was a bunch of other parts to it that we kind of overlooked. There's the continual reinforcement that the Vulcans are just weird, because Cybok's mom was a Vulcan princess. So the uberlogical types also have royalty. And they show Spock's birth because Cybok tries to do the whammy thing on him, and he was born in a cave with like no medical equipment anywhere, and just got on a rock. And like again, this is the advanced spacefaring logical race, giving birth to kids in caves, and which of course was when Spock turned around and is like, Cybok, you think I don't regret things. It's not gonna work on me, buddy. And then Kirk gave him the, you're not gonna take my pain. Pain defines who and what we are. Like, you sound like a cult leader. I don't remember exactly what he said. He didn't call him cult leader, but something like that. And he's like, you're not gonna do that to me. Like, I need my pain. And obviously that's a reference to his son dying. And probably God only knows what else, Spock dying in 2 movies ago and everything else. But then you see, like Jim mentioned in our original, what Bones went through.
Yeah, I mean,
basically having to, euthanizing his dad because he was in so much pain, and then weeks or months later they found a cure for it. And yeah, so initially when Cybok's like, all right, well, Bones, are you coming with me? Bones is initially going to go, and then he turns to Spock, and Spock's like, no, I'm staying with my captain. And then Bones is like, yeah, I got to stay here too. And one thing I did find kind of odd, once they get through the barrier, which as Jim noted, they just fly through it. We got no indication as to what made their trip special versus anyone else. They get through, Kirk finds his way back up to the bridge, and that's when Cybok he's like, so you're gonna arrest me again? And Cybok's like, no, the ship needs its captain. And he's like, hey, I won't just turn the ship around. And he's like, because you have to know just as much as I do. He's like, no one's ever made it here. We have to know. You're an explorer. I know you do. And so he trusted Kirk. He knew enough about him to know that he wasn't just going to turn around. He had to know, even if it was just to prove Cybok wrong, which is what he was expecting. Which leads to, again, the most important question in sci-fi: what does God need with a starship? And once he got zapped, then Spock had to take up the mantle of questionnaire. And then he too got zapped, I believe. Yeah. Now I like how the Klingons come in and destroy the entity, and then or I think it's just before they do, but Kirk sees the bird of prey and he's like, all right, you Klingon bastards, I know you've come for me, just do it. Thinking that that's why. And then they shoot the entity and he's like, oh, okay.
No, but I think, I mean, obviously, it's been a little bit since I've rewatched it, and honestly, sometimes going into these retrospectives without, a recent thing, just what do you remember of it? I think it's good because then when you go and watch it, then you can have these kind of follow-ups. But, one thing with that is like with the fifth one is that it just with a little bit of writing changes, a little bit of different direction, I think it could have been a good movie. Like not even a perfect, but a competent movie in the series. Like one that you would say, because three's not, some people think three is not really that great of a movie. I think it's got its plus and minuses, but I mean overall, I like the third movie. I like the fourth one. I mean, the first one's like you said is the hard one to get through, and
I think he just
yeah,
tried. I think he just tried too much to just be a pure sci-fi movie. Because again, like I mentioned the other, I think two is where they figured out the formula, and I'm going to mention that here again in a
well,
second.
that
But
and they wanted a special effects extravaganza there
yeah,
with that, um, but they didn't quite. Yeah, like I said, it's all visually looks great in the first one, and I think the second one definitely comes after it, but yeah, they just make no reference to the events of the first one. They just say, okay, well now we're going to refit Enterprise. We're going to go and everything's going to continue on without mentioning that, which is I think the only one that they don't have some previous mentions in each one of the
yeah,
further.
and that's another thing. In five, there is a very subtle mention to some of the other movies. At the very beginning, whenever Spock, Kirk, and Bones are all camping, Spock does something. I don't remember what triggered it because McCoy tells him, "I liked you better when you were dead." So like they acknowledge the past movies briefly, but they do. But also going back to the formula, just in case you didn't watch the other episodes, which I urge you to do that. This video will make a lot more sense if you do. The formula is essentially you have to some way confront the human condition, and typically it's growing older in the other movies, and you could see it here. But so five, it tried because it does pose one of those questions that we all tend to have, which is is there a god? You know, and the other races in Star Trek all believe in other gods too. So that's a universal question, and so the movie, it goes in that direction. It just falls a little short on the execution. Uh, and so I think they had a good idea, and whatever I don't remember exactly what I said the other one on this topic, but um, I do think it's a worthwhile movie. I think it's on the lesser end of the six, but I don't think it's a terrible movie by any stretch, and I think it's definitely better than I remember it being. But I think the only time I actually watched it all the way through is when I saw it in the theater. Okay, I saw bits and pieces here and there because I watched all of them from the fourth one on in a theater, and then more recently we saw The Wrath of Khan in a reshow.
Now, did you notice in the jet boot scene when they
Yeah,
find out
yeah, well, yeah, what you were talking about. Yeah,
the
they pass the same floor a couple times, and it's like 90 decks or something, and
yeah,
yeah,
and
yeah, and there's a handful of humorous moments too, which the movies need that kind of levity. Like whenever they're locked in the cell, uh, Spock's trying to tell him like, "Don't do that, don't do that," and he's like this cell's escape proof. Like they had someone test it and they couldn't get out. And finally, Kirk, I think, is like, "Did that someone happen to have pointy ears by any chance?" And he's like, "In point of fact, he did." And so that's when they realize they're not getting out. Because if Spock can figure out a way out, they aren't going to figure out a way out. And it's ultimately Scotty blasting a hole in the back, having to use Morse code to tell him to stand back right at the moment. And then Scotty's going on about how he knows the ship like the back of his hand and walks right into like a steam pipe or something and knocks himself unconscious. So, you need those moments of levity.
well, that's because in a lot of times in or times of trauma, humor is usually a lot of ways that people, I know
Yeah.
I personally do. Uh, it's how I alleviate that anxiety, the stress from a traumatic situation. Is like I find the humor in things, and
Yeah, it's the old if you're not going to laugh, you're probably going to cry kind of situation.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
But yeah, so overall, like I said, as I was editing the other movies, I watched these two, and I realized that there was more to them than at least what I talked about. Jim carried quite a bit in those two movies. He remembered them way better than I did, and there are just some things that I noticed that, like I said, do kind of help connect the movies. not in some grand sweeping narrative way, but it's a bunch of little details that give that culmination in 6 of finally ending the war with the Klingons, like gives it a little more oomph, because that was like the all-consuming. If there is a plot to the original series, that's it. Is the war with the Klingons. It's not in every episode or anything. It's kind of like the X-Files. Half the episodes are Monster of the Week, but the other half is the conspiracy. And I really miss the X-Files. It's a good show. But yeah, so that's pretty much what I wanted to say. I don't think there's any other major things. I'll probably think of them as soon as we're done recording, and I'm not going to make a third video if I don't have to.
Yeah, because I was going to say, next on the docket would be to do the
next 4, the Next Generation movies.
Yep, and they are now back on Paramount Plus.
Oh, I bought a set. I bought the set of like all 10 of them on Voodoo at one point, so I've got them.
It's more from my my view, and I have them somewhere in some formats, but
yeah, I'm going to try not to make the same mistake. I can remember Generations, First Contact, and Nemesis pretty well, but I'm definitely got to rewatch Insurrection, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to end up binge watching all of them, so that way
I probably should. I'm going to try to. So, but so hopefully you folks checked out the other videos. We have them broken down by movie for the first 6 movies. Then we also have the giant when we just talked 1 through 6. I did put the timestamps in, so if you hate 5, you can jump from 4 to 6. Yeah, definitely check those out if you haven't. Hopefully you did before you watch this one. I'm gonna link to them in the description, assuming I don't put them up here somewhere. But yeah, otherwise, thank you for watching. Again, if you get the chance, check us out on Twitter at The Real Geek Cabal, and YouTube. Of course, you're on YouTube. Facebook at Geek Cabal, and comments here. Let us know because the other videos all got comments. So just let me know. If you feel the same way about some of the things we mentioned here or there. What do you think of us doing little follow-up videos like this when we realize we forgot and or should have included other things?
Our retrospectives of a retrospective?
Yeah, the Inception the retrospection Inception mode where we just kind of go within to within to within.
Well, but every time you do a video, you realize there was a talking point there. I should have said this. I should have said that. And sometimes you just have to go, you know what? I have to walk away from this for a moment, gather my thoughts, come back with an additional, just a little bit of talking points and stuff. And
yeah, as you'll probably figure out if you watch all of our videos, we recorded another video at the same day as we recorded this one. And definitely as we were loading the video, I was like, there was another book and another movie I intended on mentioning there, and we're just going to save that for round 2 if we have one, which we probably actually will on that particular topic. But
well, it's always something we can always say for the podcast too when we start getting some more people sitting around the table here and discussing topics and that kind of stuff. So
yeah. So anyway, let us know what you think about any of that. It's YouTube, so like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. But otherwise, live long and prosper.
Again.
Actually, I think the Sarek said that to Picard in the one episode where Picard had to lend him his mind so he could be sane. And didn't Picard have a different response? Wasn't his it wasn't live long and prosper. It was something like be well and may your fortunes be with you or something. I'm completely screwing this up now, folks. So I'm probably going to cut this from the other point.
Gag reel?
Yeah, what the hell was it though? That's going to bother me. Give me just a second in case I can think of it. Well, long life and good fortune, I'm pretty sure is what he told him. So, because no one ever responds to live long and prosper, or it's Spock and Sarek saying it to each other. But whenever someone says it to Kirk, he doesn't respond. He doesn't say live long and prosper back to him.
It could be Zephyr and Cochrane and just go.
Yeah.
Just
then take him to the bar.
Well, still better than what happened in The mirror universe.
Yeah, the bar was better than the 12 gauge to the chest. So, folks, like I said, live long and prosper, or long life and good fortune.